The Grand Volta Hotel had 43 floors, 11 conference suites, a rooftop bar that charged €40 for a glass of Prosecco, and a ballroom on the second floor that hosted, on the last Friday of every month, the kind of gathering that did not appear in any diary and was not mentioned by name. You were either on the list or you were not, and if you did not know whether you were on the list, you were not. Mara Kovas had been cleaning the ballroom for 4 years. She arrived at 8 in the evening with a cart that smelled of eucalyptus and steel polish, and she moved through the space the way she moved through every space in this building, completely. Invisible in the specific way that people in certain uniforms were invisible, present, necessary, and so thoroughly ignored that she might as well have been furniture with a mop. She had studied this invisibility with the same precision she brought to everything. She had catalogued it, mapped it, made it useful. In 4 years, she had learned the layout of every room on floors 1 through 12, the rotation schedule of the overnight security team, the combination to the service lift override, the names of every man who had ever walked through the ballroom with the particular weight of someone who owned things that did not appear on any balance sheet. She was mopping the far end of the ballroom, the end that curved toward the private anteroom where, in 30 minutes, the evening's guests would begin to arrive, when the glass hit her. Not thrown at her, precisely. Thrown in her direction, by a man she would later identify as Vico Sana, a name she already had in her files, cross-referenced against 3 other names and a set of financial structures that she had been building a picture of for 11 months. He had been standing at the bar set up along the east wall, arguing with someone on his phone, and he had made the gesture of a man expressing disgust at whatever he was hearing, and the whiskey glass had left his hand in her direction and struck the marble floor 2 feet from her cart. The glass shattered. Whiskey spread across the marble she had just cleaned. Vico Sana looked at the mess. He looked at Mara. Then he looked away and continued his phone call. He did not apologize. He did not check if she was hurt. He did not acknowledge in any way that she was a person who had been standing in the space his glass had just been thrown into. The ballroom went quiet, not all of it, not dramatically, but the section nearest the bar. 3 men who had been talking nearby stopped talking. A woman at a table looked up from her phone. The bartender, mid-polish, did not finish the polish. And then someone stood up. He came from the seating area on the north side of the room, where he had been sitting alone with a glass of red wine and the specific stillness of someone who is present but not performing presence. He rose from the chair with the economy of movement that came not from training but from temperament, a man who did not waste motion any more than he wasted words. He crossed the ballroom floor in 8 strides. He stopped in front of Vico Sana.
He said something.
Mara was too far away to hear it. She saw Vico Sana's face change, saw the precise sequence of expressions that moved across it like weather. Irritation, recalibration, something that was not quite fear but was adjacent to it. Vico Sana ended his phone call. He looked down at the spilled glass. He reached into his pocket. He placed 4 folded notes on the edge of Mara's cart without making eye contact with her. The man who had stood up watched this happen. Then he turned and looked at Mara. No one had looked at her, truly looked at her, in 4 years of working in this building. People looked at the cart, at the mop, at the uniform. They did not look at the person inside it.
He did.
She looked back. No one noticed her until the most dangerous man in the room did. She just didn't know yet which problem that was going to be. If stories about invisible women and the men who finally see them are your obsession, subscribe and hit the bell. A new story drops every week.
Now.
Let's go. His name was Enzo Valetti. She had a file on him. She had files on most of the men who moved through the Grand Volta on the last Friday of every month, compiled over 11 months with the patient methodology she brought to everything: observation, cross-reference, inference, confirmation. Enzo Valetti was 41, had inherited the management of his family's construction and logistics group at 34 when his father died in a way the inquest had called accidental and that several people in several organizations had discussed very quietly as something else. He had studied economics in the North. He ran his operation with the specific restraint of someone who understood that visibility was the most dangerous luxury in his world. She had assessed him as controlled, intelligent, and more dangerous than he appeared. The last point was the most important one. She had not, in her file, included a section on what he looked like when he stood up for someone he did not know. She filed this now. He came to find her 20 minutes later, when she had moved her cart to the corridor outside the ballroom and was working on the marble floor near the service entrance. He came alone, which was notable. Men of his position in spaces like this one moved with company, the way planets moved with gravity. He came without it. He stopped at a distance that was respectful. She noted this. "Are you all right?" he said. She straightened and looked at him. She was 42 years older in her eyes than in her face, and she knew this, and she used it carefully, knew which version of herself to present in which context. She presented, now, the version that was simply a cleaner who had been startled.
"Fine," she said.
"Thank you." He should have apologized. People like that don't usually apologize. He studied her for a moment with the quality of attention she had identified in his file as his most distinctive trait. Genuinely focused, not performative. The attention of someone for whom understanding was not instrumental, but habitual. "No," he agreed. "They don't." He paused. "What's your name?" "Mara," she said. "Mara." He said it the way careful people said names. "Once, to fix it." "How long have you worked here?" "For years." "You know this building well." It was not quite a question. She looked at him with the measured neutrality she used for exactly these moments. The moments when a conversation had a surface level and a level below it, and you needed to respond to both without acknowledging the second one existed. "Well enough," she said. He looked at her for a moment longer. Then he reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and produced a card. He placed it on the edge of her cart with the same deliberateness Vico Sana had placed the money, but the quality of it was entirely different. Sana had been buying off a witness. This man was doing something else, and she was not yet certain what. "If you ever need anything," he said. "Or, if anyone in this building treats you that way again." She looked at the card. She looked at him. "Thank you," she said, in the tone of a woman accepting a courtesy and nothing more. He nodded once and walked back toward the ballroom. She watched the way he moved, the same economy of motion, the complete absence of performance. A man who had made a decision and acted on it, and was now returning to what he had been doing before. She picked up the card. She held it for a moment. Then she put it in the pocket of her uniform, and went back to work, and spent the next 3 hours completing the most efficient intelligence reconnaissance of the Volta's second floor she had managed in 11 months, because a man who had stood up for a cleaner had just given her something she had been trying to find for nearly a year, a reason to be noticed.
She was careful about this.
She was careful about everything. But she also could not pretend that the card in her pocket weighed nothing. Gianluca was waiting for her at the service exit when her shift ended at midnight. He was 24, earnest in the way of people who hadn't yet decided whether the world was worth trusting, and he had been the junior member of the cleaning team on the second floor for 6 months. He had the quality she had noticed in certain young people of absorbing more than he appeared to and saying less than he knew. "The man who stopped Sana," he said, not quite a question. "What about him?" "Everyone's talking about it." He fell into step beside her. "Nobody stops Vico Sana."
"He did," Mara said.
"You know who that was?" "Enzo Valetti." She said it with the flatness of someone recalling a name from an unremarkable list. "He manages the family construction group." Gianluca was quiet for a moment, in the way of someone deciding whether to say the next thing. "He asked about you," he said, "before he came over. He asked Petra at the front desk what your name was." Mara walked for a moment in silence. She filed this. "Get some sleep, Gianluca," she said. "You look tired." She turned toward the staff car park and felt, in the quiet of the November street, the specific recalibration of a plan that had just been changed by something she had not planned for. He asked about her before he walked over. Drop a heart in the comments if you already know this woman is not what she appears to be. Her name was Mara Kovas. That part was true. She had been born in a coastal city with a shipyard and a particular quality of gray winter light, the second child of a woman who worked in municipal records, and a father who had died when Mara was 9 in the abrupt and avoidable way of men who had been making a specific kind of decision for years. She did not speak about her father. She had filed him, long ago, in the category of information that explained things without helping with anything. She had studied law. Not completed it. She had come within a semester of completing it, which was a fact she found mildly useful in the same way she found most facts useful, not inherently, but potentially, depending on the situation. Something had happened in the final year of her degree that had redirected the course of the following 9 years with the efficiency of a precisely placed object in a moving system. She cleaned hotels now. This was the most visible thing she did, and visibility was a resource she managed with the care of someone who had learned, expensively and only once, what it cost to be seen before you were ready. The file she had been building for 11 months was not a single document. It was a structure, a network of cross-references and confirmed intelligence that lived in the apartment she kept in the eastern quarter of the city, behind the false panel in the kitchen cupboard that she had built herself on the second weekend after she moved in. The apartment was small and neat and contained almost nothing personal, which was itself a kind of information she had provided deliberately to the handful of people who had ever been inside it. The structure documented the movement of money and materials through 3 interconnected operations that intersected at specific points and that she had concluded after 9 months of mapping, a common upstream source she had not yet been able to confirm. Vico Sana was not the source. He was an instrument, a logistics problem with expensive tastes and no conscience, the kind of operational figure that organizations deployed when they needed something moved without asking questions about its provenance. She had confirmed this in month 7. She had continued building the picture because the source was the point, and the source was still unclear. Enzo Valetti was something she had been watching for 3 months. Not as a suspect, or not only as a suspect, which was a distinction she was precise about. As a variable. He moved through the same operational territory she was mapping, and he did so with the specific care of a man who was either very good at concealment or had nothing to conceal, and she had not yet determined which. His file was the thickest in her kitchen cupboard and the least resolved. She used his card on a Tuesday, not because she needed to, because the opportunity it represented, the specific, proximate access to the territory she had been mapping from a distance for nearly a year, was the kind of opportunity that appeared once, if it appeared at all, and that she had learned, from the last time she had let one pass, not to waste. She sent a message to the number on the card. She said, "I had a question about the building." The framing was deliberate, vague enough to be deniable, specific enough to communicate that she was not calling about the money on her card. He replied within the hour. He said, "I'm at the Volta Thursday evening. Come to the bar at 7 if you're working." She was not scheduled to work Thursday. She arranged to be. He was at the bar at 7 alone, with a glass of red wine that appeared to be his default setting in this building. He saw her cross the lobby and watched her arrive with the specific attentiveness she had noted the first evening, not predatory, not performative, just present. She was still in uniform. She had considered this carefully. Out of uniform, she became someone else, someone with a different weight in this conversation. In uniform, she was still Mara the cleaner, which was a position of apparent weakness that she had spent 4 years making into something considerably more useful. "You came," he said. "I said I had a question." "Ask it." She sat on the barstool beside him with the composure of a woman who sat on barstools next to men of his position regularly, which was the composure she intended. She looked at the bar, at the precise arrangement of bottles behind it, at the reflection of the room in the mirror above them.
"Vico Sana," she said.
"He's here every last Friday." "Yes." "Is he connected to you?" The question landed in the space between them. She watched him receive it, watched the small recalibration, the fraction of a moment where he decided what this question meant and who was asking it. "Why are you asking me that?" he said. "Because you stopped him." She met his eyes. Men with connections to each other don't usually do that. He was quiet for a moment. He looked at his wine glass. Then he looked at her with the directness that she was beginning to understand, simply his default mode rather than an interrogation technique.
"No," he said.
"He's not connected to me. He's connected to people I have dealings with. That's a different thing." "Is it?" "It matters to me that it is," he said. She held his gaze for a moment. Then she picked up the glass of water the bartender had placed in front of her and drank from it, and said, with the precision she brought to conversations that were happening on 2 levels at once, "What does he move?" The silence that followed had a different quality from his previous silences. Not the silence of a man deciding what to tell her, the silence of a man who had just received a question that had rearranged his understanding of what kind of conversation he was in. "Mara," he said slowly. "Who are you?" "Someone who mops floors and asks questions," she said. She stood. "Thank you for the drink." She went back to work. She did not look back. Behind her, She heard him remain at the bar for a long time.
Good.
She needed him thinking. There was a room on the 9th floor of the Grand Volta that Mara had been assigned to clean exactly once, in her 3rd month of employment, and that had subsequently been removed from her rotation without explanation. She had noted this. She had not pursued it immediately because the first rule of the kind of work she did, the real work, not the mopping, was that you did not move toward the thing that moved away from you. You moved in parallel. You waited until it stopped moving, and then you understood why it had been moving at all. Room 914 had stopped moving, in the sense of registering on any cleaning schedule, 14 months ago. It was listed on the hotel's internal system as an executive storage suite, which was the designation used for rooms that had been taken off the guest rotation for administrative purposes. The designation was not unusual. The particular administrative purpose in this case was, she had established, over 8 months of patient lateral inquiry, never direct, never from the same angle twice, that room 914 received regular deliveries from a logistics company whose registered address was a warehouse on the Eastern Ring Road that did not appear in the city's commercial directory, and that was one of the 3 operations in her kitchen cupboard file. Vico Sana had a key card for room 914. She had confirmed this in month 6. Enzo Valetti, she had not been able to confirm one way or the other. His file had 3 question marks next to his name and the room number, which was 3 more than she accepted in a completed intelligence picture. She raised it with him on their second conversation. He had found her. She had noted this, rather than waiting for her to find him. It was a Saturday afternoon, the hotel quiet in the specific way of large buildings between events, and she was cleaning the 3rd floor corridor when she heard his footsteps from the lift. She had learned his footsteps by now. She had learned a great many things about the way Enzo Valetti moved through this building. He stopped at a distance she had come to recognize as his default. Respectful, not crowding. The distance of someone who had learned that respect was shown in space, as much as in words. "You asked me what sauna moves," he said. "You didn't answer." "I've been thinking about whether to." She straightened and looked at him with the expression she used in these moments. Attentive, neutral. The faint patience of a woman who had more time than he assumed. "Have you decided?" He looked at her for a long moment. He had the specific quality of a man running 2 calculations simultaneously and not entirely pleased with either result. "I've decided," he said, "that you already know, or most of it, and that the question you were actually asking on Thursday wasn't about sauna." "What was it about?" "It was about whether I know." The corridor was quiet around them. Somewhere several floors above, a door closed. The building breathed. "Do you?" she said. He was quiet for a moment that had the specific weight of something being decided. "I know enough to have been trying to close the connection for 6 months," he said. "And not enough to understand why I can't."
She held this.
She turned it over with the careful attention she gave to information that changed the shape of the picture she had been building. "The room on the 9th floor," she said. His expression shifted. Not surprise, something more controlled than surprise, the specific look of a man who had been expecting a question and had not been certain what form it would take. "You know about 914. "I was assigned to clean it once," she said. "Then I wasn't." "When?" "Month 3. About a week before the cleaning rotation changed." He was very still. She watched him absorb the implication, the timeline, what it meant about who had made that change, and when and why. "I didn't know that," he said. "I know," she said. "That's why I'm telling you." She went back to her cart. He stood in the corridor for a long moment after she moved on. She could hear the quality of his stillness behind her, the particular silence of a man whose understanding of a situation had just been revised in a direction he had not anticipated. She did not tell him what she knew about the logistics company or the warehouse on the Eastern Ring Road. She gave him the room number and the timing and let him carry it because information that people carried themselves landed differently from information they were handed, and landing was everything. Petra found her at the staff break room at 10 that evening. Petra was the front desk manager, 51, and had worked at the Grand Volta for 19 years with the institutional knowledge of someone who had absorbed the building's complete history by osmosis and retention. She was not Mara's contact, exactly. She was something more useful, a person who noticed things and trusted the right people with them. She sat across from Mara at the break room table and folded her hands and said, without preamble, "Valetti asked about you again today." "What did he ask?" "How long you'd worked here. Whether you'd ever had complaints against you. Whether you'd been assigned to any of the executive floors." Petra paused. "I told him you were the best worker on the second and third floors and that you kept to yourself and that if he had questions about the staff he should speak to HR." "What did he say?" "He said thank you." Petra looked at her with the particular attention of a woman who had spent 19 years watching people move through a building and had learned to read the patterns. "He's not the one you should be worried about." "I know." "Ferraro was in yesterday. He went up to the 9th floor. He was there for 40 minutes. Mara was very still. Dante Ferraro. The name that sat at the center of her kitchen cupboard file with more question marks than any other and the fewest confirmed facts, which was its own kind of answer about how carefully he had been managed. "Did he check in at the desk?" "He never checks in at the desk," Petra said. "That's the point." Mara sat with this for a moment. Then she stood, rinsed her mug, put it on the drying rack. "Thank you, Petra." "Be careful," Petra said. Not as a warning, as a statement of priorities.
"I always am," Mara said.
She went back to work, and she thought about Dante Ferraro and room 914 and the specific impression of a timeline that had just become 6 weeks shorter than she had planned for. Ferraro just entered the picture. Drop a heart if you already knew it was never just about Sana. Like this video, it takes 2 seconds and means everything to this story reaching more people. The grandmother arrived without warning on a Wednesday morning. Mara was polishing the brass fittings on the second-floor landing when the small, entirely composed woman came up the stairs from the lobby. Stairs, not the lift, which was the first thing Mara noted about her, and stopped at the top with the unhurried authority of someone for whom every room was simply the next room she had decided to enter. She was perhaps 80. She wore her age with the specific indifference of someone who had long since stopped accommodating the expectations of people who had not earned her attention. She had eyes the color of winter slate, and they found Mara across the landing with the directness of a guided thing.
"You're the one," she said.
Not a question. Mara straightened slowly. "I'm the cleaner on this floor," she said. "You're the one my grandson can't stop thinking about," the old woman said, with the flatness of someone correcting an inaccuracy. "Which is more interesting and the reason I came." Her name was Lucia. She settled herself into one of the lobby chairs with the authority of a woman who had been settling herself into chairs she did not own for 80 years and had no intention of stopping. She looked at Mara with the patience of someone who had already decided what she thought and was simply waiting for the conversation to catch up. "Sit," she said, indicating the chair across from her. Mara sat. She was careful about her reasons for sitting, not compliance, but assessment. A woman who came alone to a hotel floor to speak to the cleaner her grandson had noticed was either foolish or formidable, and there was nothing in Lucia Valetti's bearing that suggested foolishness.
"He told you about me," Mara said.
He described a cleaner who asked questions about Vico Sana and was not afraid of the answer. Lucia's pale eyes were steady. He did not describe a cleaner. "People see what the uniform tells them. My grandson sees more than most." The old woman paused. "As do I." She folded her hands in her lap with the precision of someone who had learned that stillness was its own kind of authority. "You have been in this building for 4 years. You have never been late, never been complained about, and never, according to every account, shown any interest in anything beyond the section of floor you were assigned to."
She paused.
"And yet you asked the most specific question about Vico Sana that my grandson has heard from anyone in 6 months of trying to understand his own operation." The landing was quiet around them. Below, the lobby moved with its usual morning pace. "What do you want?" Mara said. "I want to tell you something," Lucia said, "and then I want you to tell me whether it changes what you're doing." Mara waited. "My husband built something in this city," Lucia said. "Over 40 years. He built it carefully and he built it to last, and he made decisions, some of which I agreed with and some of which I did not. When he died, Enzo inherited it."
She paused.
"Enzo is not his father. He is more careful and less ruthless, and he understands, in a way his father did not, that the things you build will eventually be measured by who's standing on them." She looked at the window. He has been trying for 2 years to understand what Dante Ferraro is doing inside the structure his father built. He has not been able to because Ferraro is very good at being inside something without appearing to be, which is, I understand, a skill you also possess. Mara was very still. You're not warning me away from him, she said. I'm telling you, Lucia said precisely, that my grandson needs to find out who you are and what you're doing at the same time that he decides what he thinks about it. The ordering matters. If he finds out who you are from someone else, you become a problem. If he finds out himself, you become something he had to earn. She stood with the unhurried precision of someone who had made all the points she intended to. Ferraro has been moving things through room 914 for 14 months. The endpoint is 5 weeks from now. After that, the damage is the kind that cannot be repaired from the inside. She moved toward the stairs. The coffee in the staff room is excellent, she said without turning. Whoever trained that machine deserves a better title. She went down the stairs. Mara sat in the lobby chair for 4 minutes, which was longer than she had sat still in a long time, and thought about 5 weeks, and what that meant for the timeline she had been building. Then she stood and went back to work and began, with the specific efficiency of someone who had been waiting for a deadline to crystallize, to move. She had not planned to trust him.
Trust was not a tool she used.
It was a liability she had been careful about since the year she was 31 and had trusted the wrong person with the right information and had spent the following 8 months rebuilding from the wreckage of what that cost. She had rebuilt well, better than before, with the specific improvements that only came from understanding precisely where structure had failed. But she had not trusted anyone with anything important since then, and she had been precise about this not as a wound, but as a professional standard. Enzo Valetti was making this standard difficult to maintain. It was not a single thing. It was the accumulation of small observations, the kind she filed individually without significance, and that had begun to form a pattern she had not intended to notice. The way he listened, not waiting to speak but actually receiving what was said, processing it, connecting it to other things. The way he moved through rooms with people of lesser position in his world. The bartenders, the front desk staff, the security team, without the specific blindness she had observed in every other man of comparable standing who moved through this building. The way he had stood up from a chair across a ballroom for a woman he had never met. That last thing she kept coming back to and had filed as strategically relevant and had acknowledged, privately, was not only that. He found her in the garden on a Thursday afternoon. The Volta had a small courtyard garden on the ground floor, accessible through a service door that most guests did not know existed, that Mara used on her breaks in fair weather because it was the one place in the building where she could sit without performing anything. He came through the service door with 2 cups of coffee and the specific self-consciousness of a man who had made a decision and was slightly embarrassed by having made it. He held 1 cup out. She took it. "You've been avoiding me," he said. "I've been working," she said. "You changed your floor rotation this week." The 3rd floor needed attention. He sat on the garden wall, not the posture of a man in a position of authority, but the posture of someone who had decided to stop performing one. He looked at the courtyard with the specific quality of someone giving a conversation space, rather than pushing it. "My grandmother came to see you," he said. "Yes. She didn't tell me she was going to. She doesn't seem like someone who announces things." He almost smiled. She had been watching his face long enough to catch the near versions of expressions he didn't complete. She's not. She also doesn't go out of her way for people she hasn't assessed as worth her time. He looked at her. "She called you precise." That's as close to a compliment as she gets with people she's known for less than a decade. Mara drank her coffee. It was good. He had not bought it from the lobby bar but from the small espresso machine in the staff corridor, which meant he knew the building better than his position required. "She told me about Ferraro," she said. He was quiet for a moment. "She shouldn't know about Ferraro." "She knows about everything," Mara said. "That's different from getting involved in it." He turned the coffee cup in his hands. "I've been trying to understand what he's doing in my operation for 2 years," he said. "I've found the edges of it. I haven't been able to find the center." "The center is room 914. "I know." He looked at her. "I don't have access to 914. The key card system is administered separately from the hotel's main security. Someone changed that administration 14 months ago." "I know that too," she said. He was very still for a moment. How long have you been watching this building? Long enough. For what purpose? She looked at the courtyard. The small square of November sky above it, the planters with their stripped branches, the specific piece of a space that most people didn't know existed. She thought about 9 years and what they had cost. She thought about the rebuilt structure and the thing it had been built to do. To understand it clearly enough to decide what to do about it, she said. That's all.
He was quiet for a long time.
He had the quality she had identified in his file, the ability to sit with incomplete information without filling the gap with assumption. It was unusual and she found it, despite herself, restful. What did you decide? He said finally. She looked at him. I'm still deciding, she said, which was truer than anything she had said to him, and considerably more than she had planned to give. He nodded as if that were the most reasonable answer available. The coffee was good, she said, standing. I asked Petra which machine she used, he said. She walked back through the service door and acknowledged, in the quiet of the corridor, that she had just told a man she had been observing for 3 months that she was not certain what she was going to do, and that this was the first truly uncertain statement she had made in 9 years, and that she could not decide whether it was a loss of discipline or the beginning of something else. She compiled the Ferraro file on a Sunday. Not the summary she had been carrying in her head, the complete file, everything she had gathered across 11 months, assembled in the specific order that made it useful rather than merely comprehensive. She worked at the kitchen table in the apartment from 6 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon, and she was thorough, and she was careful, and when she was finished she read it through twice and found it accurate and sufficient. It documented 14 months of deliveries to room 914 from a logistics company on the Eastern Ring Road. It documented the financial structure behind that company, a chain of 3 shells that ended at a name she had spent 4 months confirming. It documented Dante Ferraro's access history for the room, reconstructed from secondary sources since she did not have the key card system, the building's maintenance logs, Petra's observations, the patterns of the loading dock schedule that she had mapped by arriving early and leaving late over a period of weeks. It documented what was in room 914. This had been the hardest part. She had not been inside the room. She had built the picture from exterior evidence, the weight specifications of the deliveries, the temperature requirements flagged in a facility's request she had found in the maintenance filing system on a Tuesday when the facility's manager had left his desk for 11 minutes. The specific type of humidity-controlled storage unit, whose dimensions matched the room's proportions based on her single cleaning assignment 3 years ago. It was not a complete picture. It was complete enough. She placed the file in an envelope. She held the envelope for a moment. Then she made a decision that was not the decision she had originally planned to make. She had planned, from the beginning of this operation, to deliver the information she gathered to the external contact who had commissioned the work, a former colleague who operated in the specific gray territory between government departments and private interests, who had given her the Volta assignment and who was expecting a report in 5 weeks. That had been the architecture. That had been the plan. She did not send the file to her contact. She sent it to Enzo Valetti. Not the whole file. Not the financial structure, or the shell company chain. She sent him the part about room 914, the delivery logs, the access history, the storage specifications. She sent it through a channel she had prepared for exactly this kind of contingency, a clean routing that could not be traced to her, but that was specific enough to communicate that the sender knew the building as well as he did. She sent it on Sunday evening. She went to work on Monday morning and moved through her rotation with the precision she always brought to it and waited. He found her Tuesday afternoon on the 4th floor, which was not her assigned rotation. She had moved to the 4th floor because it had a window that looked onto the loading dock, and she had wanted to see who came and went on Tuesday afternoons, and she had been right to want this. Dante Ferraro's car had been in the loading dock for 40 minutes starting at 1 o'clock and had left in a direction that was consistent with the Eastern Ring Road. Enzo came through the stairwell door at 2:15. He looked at her with the expression of a man who had received information that rearranged a picture he had been looking at for a long time and was still taking the dimensions of the new shape. "You sent that," he said. It was not a question. She did not treat it as one. "Yes." "How long have you known?" "Most of it for 3 months. The storage specifications, for weeks." He was quiet for a moment. She watched him make the calculation she had been expecting, the calculation about what this meant for who she was and why she was here, and what the correct response to both questions was. "Why did you send it to me?" he said. "Why not, whoever you're working for?" "Because it's your building," she said. "And because Ferraro is in your operation. And because whoever I'm working for can get what they need another way." She paused. "You can't get it another way. You're inside it." He looked at her for a long time. "That's a very specific kind of loyalty to someone you've known for 3 weeks." "It's not loyalty," she said. "It's the right thing to do." "Both of those can be true," he said. "Which one is real?" She looked at him steadily. "Both," she said. "That's usually how it works." He picked up his phone. She watched him do it and understood what it meant, the decision being made, the mechanism being set in motion. She had given him what he needed. The rest was his. She went back to her cart and continued down the corridor and thought about the particular weight of a decision made not because it served a plan but because it was simply correct. She had not done that in a long time. Dante Ferraro was gone by Thursday. Not dramatically. The Volta security team found the room key card deactivated and room 914 empty at 6 on Wednesday evening, when Enzo had arranged for an administrative audit of the 9th floor. The room contained nothing by then, the storage unit gone, the delivery documentation gone, the 14 months of whatever had been moving through that room relocated in the specific way of someone who had been given sufficient warning. She had not given the warning. She was certain of this. Had traced the route from her Sunday message to Enzo through every step, and the route was clean. The warning had come from somewhere else, which meant there was a third point of information flow she had not mapped, which meant the picture was still incomplete. She sat with this in the staff break room on Thursday morning and let the recalculation run. Ricci came to the hotel on Thursday afternoon. She had seen his name in Enzo's file. Salvatore Ricci, 62, former investigator, the specific kind of man who crossed from one side of a professional table to the other in his 40s and had been making himself useful on the new side ever since. He arrived with the watchfulness of his profession baked into every movement. The scan of a room before entering it, the placement of a back to the wall, the eyes that did not quite stop moving even in the middle of a conversation. He found her on the 2nd floor. He had asked for her specifically, which told her he had been looking before he arrived. He stopped at a distance, slightly less respectful than Enzo's default. She noted the difference. "Mara Kovas," he said. Not a greeting. "Yes." "You've worked here 4 years." "Yes." "You were on the cleaning rotation for the 9th floor in your first month." She held his gaze with the measured patience she used for people who were testing the perimeter of what she would confirm. "For one assignment," she said. "Then I was moved to floors 2 and 3. "Who moved you?" "The facilities manager at the time." "I wasn't given a reason." Ricci looked at her with the flat attentiveness of his profession. "You're not what you appear to be," he said. "Most people aren't," she said. "I'm going to find out what you actually are," he said. "I'm good at that." "I imagine you are," she said. She held his gaze steadily. "When you do, what you'll find is that everything I've done in this building served Enzo Valetti's interests and no one else's." She paused. "That's not the answer you're expecting, but it's the one you'll confirm." He looked at her for a long moment. She watched him assess it. The claim, the delivery, the quality of someone who was not trying to manage him but was telling him something directly, which was, she knew, exactly the thing an experienced investigator least expected. He left without another word. Enzo came to the 4th floor window that evening. She was there again. The loading dock quiet below, the city going to its early dark. He came through the stairwell door and stood beside her at the window without announcing himself, which was, she had come to understand. Simply his way. "Ricci spoke to you," he said. "Yes." "What did you tell him?" "The truth." She looked at the loading dock. "That everything I've done here served your interests." He was quiet for a moment. "Is that true?" She considered this with the seriousness it deserved. "It became true," she said. "It started as something else. It became that." He turned to look at her. She could feel the approach of the question she had known was coming for 2 weeks. The question that had been building through every conversation in every corridor and courtyard and stairwell, through the coffee and the card and the ballroom and the room on the 9th floor. Who are you really? He said. She looked at the city through the window. The lights were coming on, the slow, warm sequence of a place going from day to evening, building by building. Someone who builds pictures, she said. Of organizations, of structures, of the way things actually work versus the way they appear to. I've been doing it for 9 years. I started because someone I worked with did something that needed to be documented, and I was the only one in a position to document it. And I discovered that I was very good at being in positions like that without anyone noticing. She paused. The Volta was an assignment. Room 914 was the specific thing I was sent to understand. By whom? Someone who has less interest in protecting what you've built than I do, she said carefully. That's why I sent the file to you instead of them. He was very still. Mara, he said slowly. I know, she said. I'm going to tell you all of it. But Ricci is going to come to you tonight with what he's found. And you need to decide what you tell him before I tell you the rest, because what you decide tells me something I need to know. He looked at her. What does it tell you? Whether the thing you want to protect, she said, is the structure, or the people inside it. She went back to her cart. She heard him remain at the window for a long time after she left. She just told him there's more. Now he has to decide what to tell Ricci. What would you do in his position? Comment below, I need to know. And if someone shared the story with you, subscribe. You clearly have excellent taste in friends. Ricci came to the hotel at 9. She heard it the way she heard everything in this building, not from a single point of information but from the composite. Gianluca's message on her phone that said only 2 words and a floor number, the change in the lobby sound that she had learned to read across 4 years the way people learn to read weather, the particular quality of the lift's movement that told her it had gone to the executive floor rather than the guest floors. She was in the staff room. She had her coat folded over the chair beside her. She was not going to leave. That was not the kind of decision she made from fear, and it was not the kind of decision the situation required. But she wanted to know that the option existed, which was a habit she had maintained since the year she was 31 for reasons that were no longer wounds, but were still relevant. She sat and waited. An hour passed. She read. The reading was genuine. She had never been able to perform concentration, only achieve it, and concentration was the thing that kept the other thoughts from taking the space she needed for something else. At 10:20, the staff room door opened. She had expected Enzo. It was Lucia. The old woman was in a coat she had not removed, which meant she had come from outside, had been called, or had called herself, and had come. She looked at Mara with the winter slate eyes and then at the coat on the chair beside her, and then back at Mara with the expression of someone who had assessed a situation and found it consistent with their expectations. He sent Ricci away, Lucia said. Mara was very still. What did he tell him? He told him, Lucia said, with the precision of someone who had been listening to the exact words, that the intelligence on room 914 had come from a source that was now an internal asset rather than an unknown variable, and that the matter of Dante Ferrara was resolved at his direction, and that Ricci should focus his attention on the Eastern logistics chain rather than on the source. She paused. Ricci was not satisfied. Ricci is rarely satisfied.
No.
But he's loyal, which is more durable than satisfied. Lucia sat in the chair across from her with the authority she brought to every chair. My grandson is in the 4th floor corridor. He went there after he sent Ricci away. He has been there for 20 minutes.
The window, Mara said.
Yes. Lucia looked at her. You were going to leave tonight. I always have the coat ready, Mara said. It's not a decision. It's a habit. There is a difference, Lucia said, between keeping the coat ready and putting it on. She stood. She moved toward the door with her unhurried precision. My grandson is standing at a window in a building he has been trying to protect for 2 years, and the person who helped him protect it is sitting in the staff room with her coat on the chair beside her. She paused at the door. That's all I'll say. She left. The door did not close completely.
Mara sat for a while.
She thought about 9 years. About what they had cost, not in the abstract but in the specific ledger of what had been given up and what had been built in its place, and whether the building had been a repair or a replacement. She thought about the apartment with the false panel and the files behind it, and the specific loneliness of constructing a life around the logistics of not being found. She thought about a man who had stood up from a chair across a ballroom for a woman he had never met, who asked about the coffee machine before he brought her coffee, who stood at windows because he needed to think, and who had learned, somewhere, to listen rather than just wait. She thought about the coat on the chair. Then she stood and left the coat exactly where it was, and walked through the building she had spent 4 years learning, through the lobby and the service corridor and the stairwell, to the 4th floor and the window with the loading dock below. He was there. He turned when he heard her come through the door, and he looked at her with the specific expression of a man who has been standing at a window for 20 minutes and has arrived at something he cannot unknow and is not yet certain what to do with it. She stood beside him at the window. Below, the loading dock was empty and quiet. The city spread beyond it in its evening grid of light, building on building, the slow, patient accumulation of a place that did not stop regardless of what moved through it. "I left the coat in the staff room," she said. "I know," he said. "Lucia told me. She's very well informed for someone who stays out of things." "She stays out of things," he said, "in the way that weather stays out of things. Present, consequential, technically uninvolved." He looked at the city. "She likes you. She told me I was precise. Apparently, that's a compliment. From her, it's the highest one." He turned to look at her. "Tell me the rest." And she did. She told him everything. The 9 years and what had started them. The contact who had commissioned the Volta assignment and what they had expected from it. The financial structure behind Ferraro, the shells, the upstream source, the name at the end of the chain that she had spent 4 months confirming, and that connected to 3 other operations in 2 other cities, and that was considerably larger than room 914. She told him about the 3rd information point, the leak that had warned Ferraro before room 914 could be caught in use. She had identified it in the 48 hours since Wednesday, and it was not in his organization. It was in hers. She told him she had sent a revised report to her contact on Sunday night, not the file she had given him, but a different document, one that documented the leak and named the source, and that had, by the time she was speaking to him now, been received and acted on. She told him she had done this before telling him, which meant she had made the decision to protect his operation before she knew what he would decide about Ricci, and that this was relevant information about the order of her priorities. He was very still through all of it. Not the stillness of the interrogation. She had been watching him long enough to know the difference. The stillness of a man receiving something large and making space for it rather than reacting to it. When she finished, the window was dark and the loading dock was lit by 2 yellow sodium lamps, and the city beyond it was doing what cities did. "You protected my operation before you knew what I'd decide," he said. "Yes."
Why?
She thought about this, not the performance of consideration but the real thing. "Because what you've been building," she said, "is worth building. Not all of it, but the parts that are yours, the choices that are yours, the way you move through rooms, and the reason you stood up in a ballroom for a woman you didn't know." She paused. "Those are worth protecting." He was quiet for a long moment. Below them, a delivery van turned into the loading dock and turned out again, deciding against it. "What happens now?" he said. "That depends on what you want," she said. "My assignment is complete. The file is delivered. I could leave tonight and not come back." She looked at the window. "Or we could decide what to do about the 3 other cities." "Together," he said. The word landed in the room with the particular weight of something she had not heard directed at her in 9 years in that specific sense. She held it for a moment. "That would require," she said, "a significant reconfiguration of how I work." "Yes," he said. "It would." "It would also require," she said, "a significant reconfiguration of how you work." "I'm aware of that," he said. He turned to look at her. He was not using the composure. She had noticed over weeks of watching that the composure was something he maintained at low continuous cost, and that there were moments when the maintenance stopped, not from failure, but from decision. This was one of those moments. "I'm entirely all right with that." She looked at him for a long moment. "Provisional," she said. "Defined terms. Review points. I retain the external contact, and you don't ask about the parts of my work that predate this building." "Agreed," he said. "And you don't ask about the northern operations until I've had 8 months to close what I need to close." "Agreed." She paused. "And I keep the coat." He almost smiled. "The real version." She had been watching for it since the ballroom, and it arrived now with the quality of something that had been waiting for the right room. "You keep the coat," he said. They stood at the window for a while. The city did not ask them what came next. It simply continued, as it always had, building toward whatever arrived. Eventually he said, "The Eastern Logistics Chain. Ricci has 2 threads, but can't connect them." "I have the connection," she said. "I found it in month 8. I was waiting for the right moment to use it." "Is this the right moment?" She looked at the loading dock, at the city beyond it, at the window that had been her observation point for 4 years and that had, tonight, become something else. "Yes," she said. She told him. He listened with the full, present attention that was simply how he was. No performance, no impatience, just the complete reception of information by someone who understood that understanding was the work. They were there until midnight. The city went to its late sounds around them. No one came looking. The building settled into its night. Gianluca went home. Petra turned off the lobby lights. Lucia, in the car outside that neither of them had known was there, read her book and waited and was, in her unhurried way, entirely satisfied. She came back the next day. Not in uniform. In the clothes she wore outside the building, which were different from the uniform in the way that she was different from the cleaner, same person, different surface, the surface finally accurate. He was in the courtyard garden with 2 coffees when she came through the service door. She sat. She took the cup. "Ricci will want to meet you," he said. "I know. I'll meet him. He'll ask questions. I'll answer the ones that serve us and give him the others in the order they become useful." She drank her coffee. "That's how it works." He nodded, as if this were the most reasonable operating procedure he had heard. Above them the November sky was doing something tentative, not quite sun, not quite cloud, the specific indeterminate quality of a city morning that had not yet decided what it was going to be. "For years," he said. "You spent 4 years in this building before anyone noticed you." "Most people spend their whole lives not being noticed," she said. "I chose it. There's a difference." And now, she looked at the courtyard, the stripped planters, the service door, the small square of sky, the room she had used for breaks and for quiet, and for the particular privacy of a space that most people did not know existed. "Now," she said, "I'm choosing something else." He handed her a second coffee, without being asked. She took it. Outside the service door, the hotel continued its day. The lobby, the floors, the rooms, the long, patient business of a building that held people's secrets and their meetings and their ordinary lives and did not, on the whole, ask too many questions about what moved through it. Mara Kovas, who had been invisible for 4 years by choice and was now, for the first time, choosing to be seen, drank her coffee and thought. Provisional, defined terms, review points. She thought, "I keep the code." And she thought, with the precision she brought to everything, that some structures you built alone because you had to, and some you built alone because you had forgotten that building alone was a choice and not a condition, and the distance between those 2 things was the most important distance there was. She turned the page. He leaned forward to read beside her. The courtyard was quiet, and the coffee was good, and no one was watching, except Lucia, 3 floors up, who had been watching since the beginning and was entirely unsurprised by how it had ended. No one noticed her, until the most dangerous man in the room did. She just chose to keep the code. If this story got you, comment, subscribe, tell me in the comments, what moment changed it for you?